All right, welcome to my official talk on Cabaret, the official part of it. Why don't we start with some little bit of audience participation? Why don't you guys tell me, shout out, what are your favorite musicals?
Oh, The Sound of Music.
Okay, any others?
I'll say Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I
Ooh, I
watch
do
very
not know
few.
a single thing about that thing, about the musical.
Oh, that's very Jewish.
But it's okay. Anything
Super
else?
Jewish.
I watch very few musicals, but maybe Nashville or Fiddler on the Roof. And by the way, my mother watched the movie with me, and she's also joining us.
Oh,
Hello,
wonderful. So
hi,
Brian Bernstein's mother,
Nancy. My name is Nancy.
hi Nancy, what musicals are your favorites?
Well, that's really hard because my daughter and I would do a Broadway show once or twice a year. So at this point, currently probably Hamilton. Um, but I also really I have an odd sense of humor, so I like the Book of Mormon as well.
Okay, so
Actually, I
here's the part.
enjoyed that. I enjoyed that one too.
Did
So,
you? Yes.
yes.
Hi, Felicia.
So
And hi. It's
what I
very
was
good
gonna
music. Very good music.
Yeah.
So what I was going to assume is that very few people are going to answer musicals from the first decade or so because it took them a long time to get their act together. Does anyone know what the very first musical is?
Oh, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
The very first movie musical.
The Music Man would have been one of
Oh,
them back in the 70s, but
the
before that.
Oklahoma or
no, the Jewish Yom
It's
Kippur
the it's
movie,
the jazz singer.
Jazz Singer.
Jazz
Yeah,
Exactly.
singer,
Yeah,
yes, yes, right.
the very
I think
first
was on
musical
it
that
too.
put music that was the very first sound movie in 1927 was The Jazz Singer, and it actually is a Jewish movie because it is about a person who, as we covered last time, was trying to decide whether to be a cantor or a Broadway singer, and the actual person was, as we said, was the person who made the movie, the Warner Brothers. They were all Jewish. I don't know if you know the. Is my screen visible?
We can see your notes, Oren.
Oh,
if
my
if, it,
notes.
if
I
that's
added this
what's
to my
on your
notes.
screen.
I'll just do it here as the So here is and he actually there was a definitely a movement by at that time to hide your Jewishness to audiences because they didn't want to alienate middle America or make it look like they were too for the war. Harry Warner or no, sorry, Jack Warner didn't mind doing that, but he also just felt like it was too obscure to tell a story about a cantor's kid. Um, but he ended up capitulating due to test audiences. This is the very first I'm just gonna play the audio. Does anyone hear this?
We didn't hear that. Nope, unfortunately.
So imagine that in 1927, the idea of sound and music is just coming together, and all of a sudden, there's like this double wow, like, okay, wow, sound and screen are together. Like, I am seeing someone talking, not in person on a screen, and then all of a sudden they add a song at the end. I don't know the degree to which the sound quality was, I don't know the degree to which the sound quality was, but in the same manner that today we have so many superheroes and so many action movies because they figure if you're going to go into a movie, you might as well get explosions and you might as well get, Marvel and whatever, and you might as well get, back then they figured, well, if you're going to have sound, we might as well have songs, which is how their musicals were so ubiquitous in the first few years that they weren't considered necessarily high art. That was more like melodramas like Gone with the Wind. And musicals were just mass produced. The very second movie to win a Best Picture Oscar was called Broadway Melody, but its real title was Broadway Melody of 1929 because we had the Broadway Melody of 1930, the Broadway Melody of 1931, the Broadway Melody of 1930, whatever. And then Warner Brothers did The Gold Diggers of 1933, 1934, and then they had all these similar titled reviews for the Hollywood Review at Paramount. There wasn't a lot of distinction. Now we see this. So one thing that happened was that we things got pushed forward because of, and by the way, if this is gonna work, this is because of like a lot of dreamers and a lot of visionaries and a lot of people who are doing really great things. I don't know, does anyone know who some of the visionaries in the field were? And I mean, this can also serve as recommendations to like, but basically the main four were like Judy Garland, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, and Ginger Rogers, and then they had and then there were just a lot of, but a lot of it behind the camera too. Busby Berkeley was doing these kaleidoscopic dances, as you can see here. There was, there were just a lot of people. There was Carmen Miranda who wore fruit on her head, which apparently was very big. There was Esther Williams. I would love to be able to show you. Oh, I can actually show you this clip, but I'm going to, I might not show it to you, but I will put it in the chat section. Who had her own pool. She was like a swimmer. She'd like swim aerobics, synchronized swimming kind of a thing. There was Ann Miller, who was a very interesting figure on her own. This is one way you used to. There's now let's see if we can. She Ginger Rogers was very famous for I guess partnering with but Ann Miller also had like she had more like taps per minute and she was like a five. She also combined kind of ballet into her move. She was like 5'8" or something. Gene Kelly was too afraid to actually dance with her because she was known as Ann Legs Miller because she was very tall, and she made the her leading men look very short. But she there's a certain I don't know. Are people seeing this now? But yeah, so anyway, there were a lot of people. There was also a guy named Arthur Freed who created a sort of a whole musical unit in MGM, which included Gene Kelly, Ann Miller, Esther Williams, all these people, and their view was more stars in the sky, and they eventually nabbed Fred Astaire too and Ginger Rogers, and well, there was some elements of it as they were doing a little bit of overworking the children there. Judy Garland ended up being subjected to 16-hour workdays, but the main kind of thing is that like just similar to say Smokey Robinson in Detroit or some era in Paris where everyone is all painting like the Paul Gauguin, Claude Monet, Vincent van Gogh years. There was just a kind of a confluence, and that was pushing things forward to the point where people were where this started to really become a high art form by the time we hit like 1940s. Let me go back here also. This is a very handy dandy list of the
So, Oren, could I ask a question?
ask all the questions. Yeah, that's
So,
kind of
as I recall,
I want an interactive. I'm just jump starting the conversation. Go for it.
the 1930s are when censorship started in Hollywood, correct? And I think that ended not long before the movie that we saw. Is that about right? The 30s to the 70s or so?
Around 60 was when the blacklist ended, and around yeah, the 1967 was the motion picture. I would say that the musical allowed you to surpass the blacklist just a little bit because you could be very risky. You could also look at Rita Hayworth, like Put the Blame on Maine, which is very sexual, and that I believe was 1954 in the musical Gilda.
Do you think there are some connections there between these post censorship movies and these pre-censorship movies?
I think in the name of art, in the name of art, in the name of dancing, you can get a little bit more risque.
Okay.
But so, is my YouTube, I can always use my phone too.
We're only seeing your notes, and so I'm wondering if you're only sharing that window, maybe.
Yeah. Any other questions? And why don't we go a little bit more towards like, what is your favorite musical number in a film? And why don't you elaborate in a couple sentences?
Uh, I'm going to take it back to the movie that we saw because I am of the age where I was young when this movie came out and w was impressed by it. And I was very much impressed by the number money in this particular in Cabaret. Um, And I can go into further detail, but I'd like to hear other people's responses before I go into further detail of why I was impressed with that song.
If you can see this, it's probably not that easy to see. This is Gilda. This is the musical Gilda. This is Rita Hayworth, who it was a very sexual dancer. Also, Marilyn Monroe was pretty active in the era of the Code, which was Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and the 7 Year Itch and all that stuff. Thank you, Adam, for the correction. For those who don't know, Adam is the resident I'm Smarter Than You Orin person who is very much appreciated for the correction. Yeah, any other just like numbers that you like a lot?
In Cabaret?
No,
Or-
just in general. We're kind of
Oh,
like
I
easing our
think-
way into Cabaret.
I
That's how I
think,
normally do. Like the first half is like we talk about a topic a little bit more.
I think Memory and Cats is absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
And I'll
And
go for
why do you like it?
It's just the music is beautiful. It's there, you can relate to it if you've had a sad experience, and it gives you hope. There's a lot of hope, tremendous hope in it for a better future. And just the music itself. I mean, maybe he's the one non-Jew, but Andrew Lloyd Webber was just, fabulous. Only non-Jew composer, but famous composer. But I just think the music is just phenomenal.
Okay. Adam, do you have an answer?
Yeah, my favorite musical number in any film is Springtime for Hitler and the original producers.
Ah, interesting, because that was not a musical, and that was more of a. All right, so I'm gonna say. So now we're gonna talk about the idea of the integrated first the backstage musical. So basically, in the very first decade or so of musicals, most of these songs, it was too jarring for audiences, and the people who created musicals didn't have the imagination to think of the idea that people would spontaneously burst into song. So therefore, a lot of times in the first era of musicals, I do not know if this works, because I feel like I have to, rather than people, I did line this clip up so it would work, and then I will, people had to be eased into it, and most of the characters, does this work? Most of the characters in musicals were just singers and performers. It was called the backstage musical, where people were putting on a show, so it was natural for them to be singing. There are also other scenes where people were in pianos or anything like that. I would like to, just to lighten the tone, show a clip that is, in this case, a little bit more humorous, about the phenomenon of people feeling a little bit weirded out by people bursting into song. And let me share my screen again, if possible. But if I don't, I share. And let's look at my screens. This is a clip from Saturday Night Live.
What kind of header with all we got? And as cobras, we got a lot. We're fast and we're strong and we're tough. We'll teach them the meaning of rough, cause they're the cobra. So you better look out.
What? How do you come up with a song so fast?
I don't know, just came to me. What about?
Just came to you. It was perfect. It was like you rehearsed it or something.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, look, here's what we're gonna do. You go over.
Hey.
What?
Did you really like it?
What?
The song.
Did I really like it? Yeah, I liked it. Hey, I like another song too. You know this one? It's called "While You Were Singing, I Got Stabbed in the Head by a Puerto Rican."
All right. Did people see that? I do not know if this is working in terms of that. I'm so sorry if there's any lags in the thing. Did that work, Felicia?
Something's wrong with my computer. That's sorry.
It was just a Saturday Night Live clip. I can also.
Oh,
I'm responding to you, Brian, because
No.
I can't even get on it. I don't know what happened.
Well, basically, I'll just keep talking through it.
My
Essentially,
computer's very hot. It's very hot.
Wait, don't worry about it. Okay, you can.
Just get on.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll just keep talking through it. Basically, because you could only make musicals about people who were professional singers and actors, people found it quite limiting. And in order to make more music, in order to make more kinds of characters, they had to find ways around it. If you go to if I go to one of the places in my talk, which is so they try to gradually ease people into worlds of of what is known as the musical world hypothesis, which I will put here, and I will these are various things, and I will hopefully will also just at any point tell me if this does not work. I'm going to share my screen once more. Do you guys see that? The musical world hypothesis?
Not sure. Oh, now it is. Yeah.
Okay, there are different ways in which people will accept having a willing suspension of disbelief. One is just the musical alternate universe, which is considered integrated, which is basically it's all just don't worry about it too much. Everything is integrated. One is it's all in their heads, which is often you're having a dream, you're thinking about it. Wizard of Oz actually work like this too. The diegetic hypothesis is, well, that's the cheat, that's the backstage musical, but it happens in other ways. One of the early, you have to give a lot of credit to the Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire musicals because they actually worked out a few ways of doing this. Once there was the musical Swing Time, where Fred Astaire is playing a piano and he's playing a familiar song called Just the Way You Look Tonight. And he's doing it because he's just sad that Ginger Rogers broke a date with him, and it makes sense within the within the reality of the universe. At the same time, when he discovers that Ginger Rogers is engaged, he sings a song called Never Gonna Dance. And also, if you guys ever want me to show clips of these things to make it more fun or realistic, you can. I might not always have time limits to play every song I'm referencing. You can kind of write down the names of these songs and you can find a clip about it. Where there's no in-universe reason for him to sing it. There's also the idea of a dramatic reconstruction where things happen in flashback, and there's also the all maestro cast, which is an episode of the 2000 sitcom Scrubs did this, where you just accept that people are very talented. When I asked you about my favorite, oh, by the way, these are the Warner Brothers, just for I don't think I'm screen shaving that one. So when I asked you guys about your favorite musicals, it was because I wanted to share mine, which is from the musical Meet Me in St. Louis, which is another one which was very transitory. It took place in 1944, and it borrows elements from both, where there is a song. This is a musical that actually popularized the song "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." It also popularized "Skip to My Lou," where in those cases someone is singing in the piano, and the Judy Garland and her little sister are just singing because people sing songs during Christmas time. This is one of the first and kind of most masterful songs, and I will stop that share and screen share to this one. So let's see if it works. I'm going to screen share, and I have no idea, but if it always works. So again, please let me know of any technical difficulties. In this musical, the character of Judy Garland is a little bit distressed that the boy she has a crush on didn't meet her for her trolley date. Can people see this?
Yes. It's just lagging a little bit.
Okay, fast forward. Then her boy toy is coming, and she's very excited.
My high tops with my hair high up on my head. I went to lose a jolly hour on the trolley and lost my heart instead. With his light brown derby and his bright green tie, he was quite the handsomest of men. I started to yell, so I counted to 10, then I counted to 10 again.
All right, so without taking too much time showing things, you can basically I find this is an example of a very early kind of integrated song where the character is singing almost to the audience, where she is realizing her emotions in real time and she's singing to the audience of the people on the streetcar. And if there's ever a reason to wonder why is Judy Garland so acclaimed, it's because she was able to take her emotions and put it into song. It sounds very much like she feels exactly why she's singing, which I think is why this is my favorite musical of all time. But it's also an example of the way that the musical gradually evolved so that when you get things like West Side Story where people are just really going at it and it's extremely unnatural. Why is this not extending? Okay. And so that's, it's so this is kind of a bit of a transitory space. Let me also show you something else. In 1951, has anyone seen American in Paris? Raise your hand or shout out if you've seen American in Paris.
Never seen it.
Anyone has seen it?
It was even before my time.
Okay, American in Paris was actually a film. Was actually it won the Oscar for Best Picture, and the people who made it, the Arthur Free Unit, as they figure we'll never top this. Um, and so Gene Kelly was actually really depressed. He was a workaholic after he made it because he's like, I can't. This is the perfect movie. I can't think of anything to. I can't think of topping this movie. So the next year they decided, well, let's just recycle a bunch of old songs and put it into a sort of musical from the early years, the less forgettable movies. And that ended up being Singing in the Rain, which is probably even more famous than American in Paris. We're going to go to the good old screen share, and we are going to go to the good old Cabaret talk. And we are the funny thing about American in Paris is that every method of using a musical is in this thing. I wrote a few of them down, but if you watch it, the American in Paris, the final song takes place in the head of the narrator. There's also piano. Stairway to Paradise is backstage. I was writing this out and then I ran out of time because I had to figure out how to do imitations. American in Paris is a dream sequence. Our Love to Hear is integrated. Stairway to Paradise is backstage. This means nothing to you because I do not have an audience who did see the movie American in Paris, but I guess you should watch that movie because it is a really good one. I'm going to stop this share and I'm going to show you I've Got Rhythm to show you something that's a little more evolved in this musical. And share.
My gal, who could ask for
This is Gene Kelly, who was very famous and a big part of this whole musical movement. So basically, in this musical, he is teaching kids he's teaching kids French, he's teaching kids music, and he's teaching kids dancing. It's a good workaround of suspension of disbelief.
We'll find him hanging round my door. Company Samantha?
All right, so without going too far, I do recommend that movie. Now we get to Cabaret. Exactly where does Cabaret fit on the spectrum? Audience participation time. From what we've seen so far, where does Cabaret fit on the spectrum?
It ain't Gene Kelly, that's for darn sure. Just kidding. It's not as brightly lit as that standard Gene Kelly Fred Astaire theme.
Yeah, and
That was more common in the 50s and 40s, which was again 20 years before Cabaret.
everything in this musical is diegetic. Basically everything in Cabaret. Cabaret is actually a step back. If you think about it as an evolution, where people were trying to get more fancy and people thought the better way to make musicals was to have people dancing as a natural extension, to people burst in song, to have people's more advanced dancing. Cabaret is actually diegetic. Every single song in the number, every single song in Cabaret is sung by someone on stage that makes sense in universe. Tomorrow Belongs to Me is not sung in a cabaret club, but everything else is sung in a cabaret club. In the stage musical, has anyone seen one of the stage musicals? In the stage musical, because this figure is sort of a figure that equals death. The MC, he sort of pops in and he sings songs, but it's still kind of a backward step. Lastly, in order to talk about, let's talk about like what's so great about the American musicals. I imagine some of you are here because we love American musicals. So before the American musicals, we had the opera and the revue, and we had various levels of theater, various regional theaters. The revue is basically a string of shows. Is like a bunch of show numbers, just like the movie Cabaret, where there's just a bunch of people singing. And there's just a bunch of theatrical songs, but they don't really have a through line. Then you have an imported that and opera where people would spend their money in entertainment before the era of movies. Opera, I'm not going to knock it so much because it's still alive and people pay their money to see it, but it needed to evolve with the times. It was a little bit outdated. For example, there's an opera I once saw. It's the only one I saw. It's called Pirates of Penzance, where there are these low-life pirates who sound like Frasier Crane from Frasier, or who sound like they've had like 10 years of training at Juilliard for how to sing. I don't buy that. What you had in the American musical in the era in Tin Pan Alley, and this is the unique thing to America, which is worth noting here, noting in all the musicals that we should celebrate, is we had characters singing like an ethnicity or culture they're supposed to sing. In Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, it takes place in Oregon, and they're playing fiddle music and pioneer music. In Brigadoon, there's Scottish bagpipe music. Music Man is a film it's a film about a fraudulent band teacher in Middle America who, through the magic, becomes a real band teacher, and it ends on 76 trombones, which is a facsimile of a John Sousa march. West Side Story, the people who wrote that musical actually spent 3 months on studio or Broadway's dime in Latin America, just figuring out exactly deconstructing those songs so they could write songs of that nature. So that's a really great thing about the American culture. The American culture of songs, and that's one of the 3 ways in which things evolved. There's also a very interesting thing about there was also a few like different theaters, one of which was Yiddish theater. What's interesting is that Joel Grey, who played the MC of Cabaret, was actually the one of the primary like people in Yiddish theater at the time. Another one was Paul Mooney, who went on to become an Oscar-winning actor. I don't know if Adam knew that, if I stumped Adam with that fact, but a lot of these, and there was also Irish theater. If you look through the Irish song catalog, and by the way, the reason I know this is never throw away your textbooks, kids, because I took an elective on history of non-Western music. I was not a music major, but I still had the textbook, and that's the easiest way to like relearn this stuff if you're giving a talk. But the Irish had a very strong tradition, and they had like one-song musicals. Like if you've ever like been in choir or something and you sing an Irish song, or you ever go to like a bar and they sing like Irish sea chanties. So there are different ethnicities that had like different things and different kind of things which were precursors to the musicals we know today, and that's the beautiful melting pot of America. Now, there is one downside to this. I'm gonna play for you authentic Chinese music, for example. In the sense that we sometimes did not get the music, we sometimes did not get this stuff right. Sometimes we had overwhelming generalizations, and we had things. This is Chinese music. I'm gonna play it for you. We sometimes we had the music that you're hearing from another culture that was so popularized on Broadway is a Western view of what this music would be like. So this is Chinese music. This is what you would hear if you go to China. In 1961, 20th Century Fox created a Roger Hammerstein adaptation of the film Flower Drum Song. It's a really good thing. I just watched it 2 nights ago to brush up for this. There's some pretty interesting casting, but it's set in mid-20th century Chinatown, and it's the only film ever, it's the only musical to feature an all East Asian cast. However, the casting is it's supposed to be about Chinese Americans assimilating. It's a love triangle, and it features 3 Japanese Americans, a Hong Kong person, a Taiwanese. Hong Kong. I would not consider China in mid 1950 because that was a colony of Britain, so they had no Chinese people. And one of the 5 leads was Juanita Hall, who was actually half black, half Irish lounge singer from New Jersey, who was also cast as a Vietnamese trader in The King and I, and would have been cast in King and I. No, sorry, in South Pacific, she would have been cast as a Siamese person or a Thai person in The King and I, but a scheduling conflict who had her replaced by Rita Moreno, who was Puerto Rican. So it's 1961. They don't have a humongous talent pool. I'm not going to blame them for that. But it is interesting to note that that they didn't exactly get the music right, and sometimes the music that we hear in the American musical songbook can be inaccurate. For example, a lot of the this is a song called "Chinatown, My Chinatown." Can you guys hear it?
No.
You guys can't hear this?
I'm not hearing.
You can hear it, or you can't hear it?
I can't hear it.
I cannot hear any.
Oh, it's tough to do this. All right. Anyway, the idea that this is based on a pentatonic scale, which is sort of an American invention. The song that you heard or didn't hear is actually written in Tin Pan Alley by 2 Jews in 1906. Then it was transferred to the Mills Brothers in the 1960s and was popularized in the New Orleans jazz circle. You can read the Wikipedia entry about it here. And if you think that's an isolated incident, has anyone seen Whiplash and heard about the song Caravan by Duke Ellington? Let's just assume that you guys are a very enthusiastic bunch and said that you have heard of that. The film The Caravan by Duke Ellington is also a bastardization of an Arabian scale. Duke Ellington, the Arabian scale means that there are 12 notes on a piano from C to C, and not all of those notes are part of the Arabian scale because it's based on Arabian instruments from the Arabian Peninsula that don't have all those notes. So some of those notes are skipped over. Duke Ellington, when he arranged that song for his orchestra and the needs of his trumpets and trombones, he added notes that weren't there. So the point is that as perfect as America is, and I would much rather have these people singing, and it's something close to authentic than just singing opera in the middle of 1950s Chinatown. There is bastardization of this musical of these foreign musics that have come to make the American musical, but it's also part of the beauty of America's melting pot. So with that in mind, that's kind of a rundown of the musical. Um, why don't we go if Adam is still here? Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about Bob Fosse, who made this movie, made this film? That gives me a chance to not talk for a bit. Adam Spector, take it away for a bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to miss the last few minutes because I kid got out of bed for a few minutes. So um, either someone else can go, or if you
I'll
come
just
back,
talk
I
about. So,
can.
what do people know about this film, and what have anyone seen? No one has seen a play version of this film. Is that correct?
Are we talking about Cabaret?
Yeah. Now we're gonna just jump into Cabaret.
Oh,
Unless
okay.
anyone
Well,
has
I
any
didn't.
thoughts on the musical and their favorite musicals or
I mean,
anything like
did you
that.
want to hear about Bob Fosse or?
Adam's not ready to talk about Bob Fosse, and
Yeah, no, no, Brian.
Adam
Brian,
is
if
the
you're
keeper of knowledge about Bob Fosse. He's
Brian,
the keeper
no,
of
Oh,
knowledge. So,
I'm not an expert on Fosse. Brian, if you know about him, please take it away.
well, yeah, I have something fun I can share about him. So, Bob Fosse's first musical debut was in this movie called Kiss Me Kate, which was another Broadway show that was adapted to the movie. Wasn't exactly the same as as the Broadway show, but the movie that he was in, he wasn't a star in it. He was maybe like supporting cast. And near the end of the movie, they actually added an additional song, and Bob Fosse had the chance to do his own choreography for that song. And when he was doing this choreography for the song, it sort of was very much ahead of its time. Probably looked strange at the time, people watching it, but that sort of was maybe a predecessor for what Bob Fosse's career would become, where he was able to have sort of this he brought a lot of modernization to the film industry, and that all started with kind of this one role that he had, where he got to do this sort of like his own improv dancing, and so that's what I think he's really known for, is sort of this improvisation, and like really bringing like jazz related things and um, just things that were definitely ahead of their time. So
okay, yeah, there's a lot to go. Why don't I just give why don't I just talk about a little bit about how this whole thing came to be? Basically, from 1930 to 1933, there was a guy named Christopher Isherwood. He was a dropout of medical school who came to Berlin to write a novel. And we will go back to this. The second paragraph of the novel says, "I am a camera with its shutter open, quite passive, recording, not thinking." By the way, rather important. Can someone just please paste the link to this meeting so I can invite Gina on board? I don't even know how to do that. So, again, meeting info. Oh, maybe it's this. Meeting info, is that it? Um, anyone just hold on a sec. There we go. I will mail my friend Gina to come in here. So basically, he was Christopher Isherwood. He had 6 chapters to his book, and it was a little bit of a scattershot book, but it was a very important time, and that's what makes a winner. He was in the right place at time in history. I mean, who wouldn't want to know about what was Berlin like right before the war? And so so he was also gay, but he decided not to have his character be gay or anything. He really believed in sort of like removing himself from the story as much as possible. He writes one chapter about spending time with communists. He writes one chapter about rooming with a pair of Jews. He writes one chapter about rooming with a gay couple, and he writes one chapter about a woman named Jean Ross, who was a 19-year-old cabaret singer and performer with dreams of being a dancer. She also, at the age of 19, one of her big stories is that she gets pregnant and decides to have an abortion, and that covers much of the first chapter. Does that person remind you of anyone? Well, let's just assume that you're participating and that the answer is Sally Bowles. Yeah, he based that character on Sally Bowles, changed the name to protect her. And one thing that changed about her, because the theme of the novel is delusion, is that he tried to paint her as apolitical and he believed that she would be apolitical. But in real life, Jean Ross went on to become an extremely political person. She was a Spanish Civil War correspondent, participated in a Spanish separatist movement for the people of the Catalan area, And Jean Ross hated everything that came after this. She hated the whole Sally Bowles character. He also had a character. So basically, at some point, and he also keeps going to Germany because he falls in love with a German man. He was last in Germany in 1938. He wanted to get his German lover to Great Britain so he could marry him. The only problem with that is that he couldn't get a passport for him, and the two got separated eventually. So even though the novel takes place from 1930 to 1933, it's informed by later trips when things got really rough, when cabarets themselves were banned. Then you have then this gets made into the movie, the play I Am a Camera, and it gets made into the play I Am a Camera with some of the characters intact. Gina, it is so great to see you. Oh, thank you. Thank God, Gina, you showed up. Gina, can you hear us? All right. Gina Barr. All right. Anyway, so as I said, he makes the movie I Am a Camera, and then it gets turned into a movie. It's okay. It doesn't have a great response, but it's great source material, and you can't write great source material like this. It's all these fringe characters. It appeals to Hollywood's liberal sensibilities. It is stuff that someone mentioned the code. It's stuff that can kind of skirt around the code because it's all based on a true story. And it's like, it's Hollywood is much more willing to talk about Nazism and all this stuff after the war than before the war. So, and it's also Broadway. Broadway was where all this, where sort of these liberal ideas were far more permitted. So a lot of people try to option this movie, but they could not. They felt like it was a little bit unwritable. The source material, I have a good quote about it, where it says, "This is the." I'll attach it into the chat. It's the main chat, and this is what someone said about the novel. It's not a novel, it's not a serious source, isn't a diary, it's just somewhat ramshackle portmanteau of vignettes. So it's a little bit difficult to make a movie. Then this guy named Hal Prince comes in and he says, let's add a few elements. Let's number one, take this Jewish couple, and rather than making them a happy married Jewish couple, let's have one of them be a self-denying Jew. And that's going to make the dynamic more interesting. Hal Prince he also was stationed himself in Germany during the war, and he sees this very curious, pale-faced MC at a nightclub who is surrounded by these voluptuous ladies, and he's trying to get the audience involved, and he never sees that, where, normally you're on stage or you're in the audience, pick a lane. And he decides that this is a great idea. Like, I want a musical where someone is breaking the fourth wall. So he adds the MC, and he decides that the MC can express sort of the darker thoughts. He can express whatever he wants. He can be a blank slate upon which he can eject more socio-political commentary. He also decides the novel is set in a bunch of unremarkable nightclubs. The cabarets had a big tradition in Germany, but he decides, why not just set it into one seedy nightclub? It's extremely metaphorical, and it'll be just the place where, people, it's a place of contradictions, and it's a place where he's saying, oh, come here, everything is beautiful, but everything is really ugly. And it's kind of a picture of Dorian Gray, per se, as the nightclub is. So he makes those changes, and it's kind of a big hit. Then Bob Fosse decides to turn this into a movie. And he makes two big changes. One is that he decides to ugly it up a little more. Bob Fosse, whenever he made a Broadway play, he was a very big pioneer in dancing and jazz hands, and he was an influence on all kinds of people, but he decided he would have his characters ugly it up a little bit. He instructed his female dancers to grow a little arm hair, gain weight, and to look like they're being directed by a third-rate choreographer. But he runs into one problem, is which he casts Liza Minnelli. He does this to sell tickets, but when he casts Liza Minnelli, he realizes there's a problem because Liza Minnelli is very talented. She's the daughter of Judy Garland, who most people know that, and she is I actually didn't even think she was talented, but then I saw some clips of her singing. And and they felt it would be a bad way to sell the movie to have Liza Minnelli dumb herself down. So they had the audience suspend their disbelief by having Liza Minnelli sing and dance. Then, so that thing comes up, and this musical becomes a big hit, but this musical continues to evolve. Joel Grey reprises his role in 1987, and he does different things to his character based on the feedback from the movie and reading reviews of the movie. Alan Cumming comes in and he plays an extremely ghastly character who is very sexually subversive and overtly Jewish. He actually, at the end, he unveils his coat to reveal that he is a concentration camp survivor, which adds a new level of psychedelic warping to the whole movie. And then Eddie Redmayne comes in. Also, the sexuality of the Brian character changes. He's bisexual, he's non-sexual, he's sexual in various things. And with the exception of Liza Minnelli's performance, the Sally Bowles character is generally shown to be a more pathetic character who is obviously not going to make it in show business because the theme is delusion. Um, Gina, or did anyone? Any thoughts there? Yeah, let's try to get some audience participation in. My goal is just to jumpstart some good discussion. So we talked earlier about how it's kind of an ugly musical. And again, that is by design, by the words of these people. I think it might be interesting to show a clip of Sally Bowles in the hands of Emma Stone. And you know she can sing from La La Land. Gina, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, the audience participation has been lower than usual tonight. So we talked about the evolution of the musical, like what our favorite musicals and how this compares to them. We talked about how the American musical evolved from opera to have distinctive songs that were distinct to different cultures and different different ethnicities and different cultures. And then we talked about the backstage versus the integrated and how Cabaret was a step backwards in that every song in it is diegetic. Every song is not, it doesn't require a suspension of disbelief. Have you seen Cabaret, and what were your thoughts about it? And have you seen it in any other form?
So myself, yes, I saw it when it came out. And so I was, young teen, and then I just recently watched it again. It is one of those films that's, whether you like it or not, how you feel it, it's just undeniable. It's just, it's shocking, it's marvelous, it's multi-layered, it's thematic, it's timeless, it's educational, it's just amazing the way musically, as a musical, it's very theatrical. It's got everything you could possibly want in a musical. I was reading a little bit about the different types of theater earlier, and I never heard this term before, called rough theater. Holy theater versus rough theater. And they were saying holy theater is like The Sound of Music, Mother Superior, and rough theater with, the MC and the garish makeup. And it's really interesting. But I'm sorry, I'm late to the party. I was trying to get on.
The party's been a little bit.
So I didn't know what was going on.
Now, why don't I show you Emma Stone's performance? Because there are different interpretations of these people.
Well, now I want to touch it more.
Oh, my great apologies. I was saying there are a lot of different. Yeah, so why don't we hash it out? Does anyone disagree? We were saying that the vast majority of us did not like the music, but I think that's part of the point. It's supposed to take place. It's a dramatic story that takes place about a nightclub that is kind of second rate and seedy and lewd. And the theme to me is delusion. It's about complacence and, so therefore Sally Bowles isn't supposed to be good. But they did capitalize Minnelli, which was they did that to sell tickets. the ideal performer would probably be someone who would sing bad but good. Um, so I guess if you look at Emma Stone's performance or something, there's a lot of sadness in it. She's like almost crying when she's like singing it. Do you guys want to see that or? I will play a little bit of it. Let's just assume you do, and I'll play, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 seconds of it. So, does this mean, Gina, that you would actually have watched the musical Cabaret, that you would actually like go to the Kit Kat Club and watch those numbers?
Well, you're putting me in historical perspective here. I just actually want to make a comment
Make all the
about
comments. The room is dead tonight, so go ahead.
the comment about garishness and people not liking the music. We talked. You asked about the history of the Jewish history just prior to the rise of Nazism. Um, it really does. This movie really does parallel everything that happened just before Hitler came into power. And the Holocaust Museum has a wonderful encyclopedia online. And it really, Oren, I sent it to you, it really lays out, I know I'm not saying the Germantown right, the Weimar period and Republic, I should say. And it really lays out, it really juxtaposed what was happening to this movie, what was happening at the time, and how they crafted this movie. It's very, very interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to read it.
Or just so you know,
I
you're sharing your screen right now. I didn't know if you wanted to get away from your email.
Let's see. I wanted to share the Emma Stone thing, so let's do that for a minute. She looks kind of scary, like she's like about to fall down in, desperation. What don't you guys think?
Yeah, it seems like she's trying to play someone who's clearly not talented. It's one of the
Yeah,
tough one. I mean, you alluded to this earlier, Oren. One of the toughest things for a talented person to do is play someone who's not talented. Um, and with Minnelli, she didn't really try. Now she was great, and she won an Oscar for this. Um, but going back to what you said earlier, only she and the MC look like they're happy to be there. All the other dancers look miserable. I've seen people that work in a DMV that look happier than that. I mean, none of the other people seem to be happy that they're working there.
yeah. This is when this musical opened on Broadway, Ben Bradley, who was the critic of the New York Times, said this. This is Alan Cummings' performance. The MC is our complicit guide to fascism. As he bids farewell at the end of the show, for perjuring himself as our guide to fascism, the MC ultimately blah blah. When Mr. Cumming with spangled nipples peeking out from beneath the black leather trench coat tells his audience to leave his troubles outside and that in here life is beautiful, he is all too obviously lying. The carnal gyrating chorus of men and women who specifically simulate assorted sexual positions look ill and spent like denizens in an S&M bar who have already let the game go on too long. There's nothing seductive, and the experience of cabaret has got to be illicit seduction. And that is so I totally understand if people might not get it. It's certainly off-putting at parts. I'm glad that we have people like Adam and Jen and Gina who are thrilled who even like the show within the show. I don't know, Brian, we haven't heard from you for a while.
Which Brian?
Brian B, I think.
Sorry, Morgan, I've been in and out of the room helping my mom pack her car.
That's, you're doing great. I hope you're just enjoying it. I hope whoever's here is enjoying it. Also, what do people know about the cabaret itself? I think the funny thing is that Christopher Isherwood said that this had nothing to do with the cabarets he saw, but if this cabaret existed, he thinks that everyone in Europe would go to it. If the Kit Kat Club existed, it would be like the highlight of Europe. It would be way better than, because the cabarets were kind of half-assed versions of what you saw. Um, there's also a thing I have, which is the 35 facts about cabarets, which is really interesting. The cabaret, I view the cabaret as like an open mic night where people are like saying down with the patriarchy and snapping their fingers and introducing themselves by their pronouns, and you kind of can suss out extremely quickly what kind of political orientation everyone is, and like everyone's, very on the same, it's like, or whatever version of that, or if it was the hippies in the 60s, but that cabarets actually evolved in contrast to the Victorian era. They started, I will share this screen as well. Also, to the person who said I was sharing my email, you are all free to like maybe answer my emails for me if you got a view of what's there and what maybe help me clear my inbox. I have no problem with that. Let's see. Share 35 facts about the cabaret.
Or, and it was funny because your question earlier regarding if we would attend a thing like Cabaret, my mother says that she has attended, and I've attended, for example, burlesque not so long ago, which is the closest thing I could think of to the Cabaret. It does give you a bit of a dirty feeling, but I think
Yeah,
everyone
I
runs
attended
into
a
that kind of
burlesque
thing.
once too. It was
Yeah.
very uncomfortable. Was it where people were stripping and having like snakes around them?
There are no snakes, but it was certainly awkward, but also worth having an open mind about.
It was extreme. Yeah, I mean, there is yeah, it was very I attended it because I thought it was supposed to be an improv show. I was keeping in touch with this improv person, and she was actually, and she was saying I'm doing a burlesque show in Atlanta, and I said okay, but it was, I didn't know what burlesque was. I didn't know why we were watching and why we were clapping. It was it was definitely very, very awkward. Um so actually started in a form of France. I view it as like a response to Victorian norms where you're celebrating being sexually more open for the sake of being sexually more open, because like it's the late 19th century. People were like buttoned up and stuff. So that's like part of the celebration. Um, it was ironically outlawed in 1933, which is when exactly the Weimar Republic era made the same year that it made its way to dictatorship. The Moulin Rouge, which is a cultural touchstone because that Nicole Kidman movie was considered one of the most iconic cabaret venues. You also had Marlene Dietrich. Has anyone seen the Blue Angel, show of hands, or any Marlene Dietrich movie? She was an openly lesbian and very she was a very sensuous performer. I don't know. She was a big fan of, she had a very interesting way of sort of cutting through the mustard, I guess you could say, when she was on screen. She was a frequent collaborator of Orson Welles too. Um, Marlene Dietrich was discovered in Cabaret. Also, some crazy songs like Mac the Knife, which is a Bobby Darin standard, was in Cabaret. And then things like the bowler hats and stockings and sequin costumes came that Brazil, Russia, Australia, and UK have, and Japan. I'm not. Japan doesn't surprise me. Japan will co-opt anything and make it crazier. So, but cabaret especially was a form. LGBT communities have found a voice in cabaret, which I think we can all sort of. That seems like a no-brainer from watching this movie. Although I don't think it's exclusive. I think we saw in the movie there were a lot of straight people who enjoy it as well, and it's you might say that it's a campy aesthetic, which overlaps with the queer aesthetic. I might not be some, it's not necessarily my cup of tea. But it is true that the very fact that cabarets were closed the year that the Weimar Republic made way towards a Nazi dictatorship, they were outlawed in 1933 in Europe, shows that this obviously was a place where a lot of intellectuals gathered and formed resistance, and it was a palpable threat to power. But yeah, it definitely is a very interesting. I do love movies that are interesting times and places and stuff. Um, we also yeah, what did you guys so well, like what did you guys think of the characters in the movie and stuff? Also worth noting, Sally Bowles modeled her my screen sharing this one. Sally Bowles modeled her look after Louise Brooks from 1920, and she was also, while her voice was pure, she was also making this is Sally Bowles' role model. Do you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Liza Minnelli's father, who of course was an acclaimed director, Vincente Minnelli. She asked him for advice because he was around when all these 20s and 30s stars were, and he was the one who suggested that she model her look on Louise Brooks.
But she also, if you look at her, she also exaggerates her eyebrows, and it's she's Liza Minnelli is a bit more attractive in some of her early in Cabaret. She also like wears way too much eyeshadow in this thing, and I think
But they all do. Everyone, all the
yeah,
performers wear
yeah.
too much
So
makeup.
Liza Minnelli is part of the sort of those eyebrows. It's that's that's she definitely does that. Also, fun picture of the Warner Brothers. If you were curious, because I said the Warner Brothers did the jazz thing, or there they are, the Warner Brothers siblings. If anyone was a fan of the '90s show Animaniacs, just a little gag. So there was a lot of like confusing. I actually still don't know personally what was up with the whole Maximilian thing, like that rich guy who was trying to seduce those two guys. I did not get that. Like I don't know. What were people's reactions? Because I was like, is
Well,
does
supposedly there was someone like that in you mentioned the real life story that there was
yeah.
someone who sexually pursued both of them and then just kind of disappeared.
Like, does Brian know that he's coming on to him until the moment he's having? Because at first, like in the first few scenes, he's like, okay, could you stop cuckolding my girlfriend? This is getting really bad. And then he's like, okay, I'm just gonna join in, or this is gonna be revenge sex against you. It was weird. There was a lot of really kind of weird relationships, I would say, in all of this stuff. As for true stories, by the way, oh, I'll let people address that before I mention another true story.
Oh, I sort of saw him as corrupting to an extent. Brian, I saw Brian as getting corrupted throughout the movie. And then I saw Max, the family's convenient escape to Argentina, being sort of contrasted with other families that had to stick around for the problems that were coming. So different people had different fates there. And in their case, just fleeing to Argentina was very convenient when everything was falling apart.
Also, in terms of real characters, the Fraulein Schneider, right, the owner of the house, she brought Chris Isherwood used her real name in I Am a Camera, and she did not like that actually. So they had to change it to like Fraulein Schroeder for legal reasons. But she played a big role somewhere in the middle, and then she kind of got reduced to like
I
a
think in
tertiary
addition to
part.
representing corruption, which I agree he does, he also represents the naivete of the old money there, thinking that, oh yeah, we'll use the Nazis for our ends, and that's okay. We'll be able to control them. Which at one point even um, Brian points out is kind of foolish. At one point he says, "You still think he can control them?"
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys ever heard of the term mise en scene, which is a fancy way of saying just the way you construct the shots, which is, filmmakers they generally take a little bit of time to control the environment, unless you're shooting outdoors. So there are plenty of shots where they they made subtle references to Nazi party candidates and posters on the walls of places they were walking back by. Uh, there's a lot of sort of propaganda on the wall, and there's even you could like even zoom in or freeze framed bonus where with some of these where you can even see like the graffiti is very illuminating of the political scene. There's a lot of like they did their research. As Gina said, this is a very multi-layered movie. But I was saying that again he played around a lot with the characters in terms of the Fraulein Schroeder had a bigger role at one point. This is definitely a what's interesting, I guess, if you really are a cabaret head, is that there's a lot of evolution of these parts. And and then you also have that couple. I don't know what people think of the. I actually thought it was a very sweet story that um illustrates exactly. I mean, it illustrates the danger of what Jews were going through. And I think that I defined a Jewish movie as a movie where you're seeing Jews be active in their religion and you're just showing it authentically on screen. And in this case, the Jews are defined by their Jewish identity is how others define them. She doesn't want other people to know she's a Jew, but there's no indication that she's necessarily a practicing Jew, and she's never at any point identifies her relationship to the religion other than it's the way other people define me. Unless I'm mistaken. I am curious about that.
Or in terms of the themes of Judaism and things like that in the film Cabaret, I think it's a reflection that the I forget the names, but the one of the one of the men, he hides his Jewish identity until he gets married to the Jewish heiress. Um, at the end of the movie, I just think it's emblematic of the fear that some Jews did have for their lives during as they saw the writing on the wall during the rise of Nazism and the rising tide of anti-Semitism. In terms of the Jewish nature of other or I just I don't consider that it's kind of like a hmm. I wouldn't and I wouldn't think that the people hiding their Judaism or being or overtly representing Judaism. I just don't think that that's there outside of the couple at the end of the movie who gets married. I honestly, I got no detection of that throughout the movie. I don't know if if I would necessarily call it a Jewish movie. And then with the reason being the fact that Judaism plays the theme, of course, in one relationship in the film, but not the main relationship, which is between Liza Minnelli's character and the Brit. So I think it's a movie, that talks about and discusses marginalized groups in Weimar Germany, and that does include Jews. But in terms of it being a Jewish movie, um, I just think that the um, the label doesn't necessarily apply to the big theme about the big themes about in the movie because the themes are so much bigger than it's about all the marginalized groups, homosexuals, people who people who the Nazis considered lewd or um, anti-German culture. So yeah, that's
Thank
my
you, Philip.
insight,
That
I
was good.
guess.
Always great to have you participate. Well, two things is one is Bob Fosse was Jewish. Joel Grey was the son of one of the leading figures in Yiddish theater and very aware of his Jewishness. And the character of the MC in later stage versions is a Holocaust victim. Actually, that's revealed that he ends up in the Holocaust and he has like a yellow gold thing on his
Oh, okay.
but it again, this is an evolving like play. There are like different versions of this. So like again, so that's interesting to note. But I think those are all valid points. I know Brian wanted to say something. Brian B.
I was just going to second that. I think that's true that there are some very big themes throughout the movie, and Judaism is a theme, but I don't think it's the biggest theme of the movie. I saw debauchery as being a major theme, ignoring a problem that's developing being a major theme, being able to run away versus being stuck with a problem being a major theme, responsibility for an issue.